The solution. Perhaps the mystery is a little too plain, said Dupin. Edgar Allan Poe. The Purloined Letter. Chapter 7. The Three Sources. In his highly regarded volume, dated 1967, Isaiah and the Assyrian Crisis, Brevard Childs, professor of the Old Testament at Yale Divinity School, laments that it will never be possible to detect the reason for Sennacherib's withdrawal without the discovery of fresh extra-biblical evidence. The complaint has become widely cited. Other investigators of the crisis use the eminent expert's cry of despair as a kind of ritual alibi for his own lack of success. Only by digging up a new inscription somewhere, they seem to be saying, will anyone be able to do more than guess at the solution to this important mystery? Yet the evidence already exists. The three familiar primary sources are chock full of telling but overlooked clues. The trick is this: to find them. It helps to be free of preconceptions that the Cushites were incapable. In Sennacherib's own accounts, the king presented his version of the campaign of 701 BC in several different genres. The principal one is the Annal, a record that the Assyrian rulers customarily wrote for each year of their reign. Written in cuneiform on a surface of baked clay and first translated into English in 1878, the principal Annal that describes the campaign is about 700 words long. The text itself is highly self-serving. Like all annals, it emphasizes the aspects of the campaign that the ruler perceives as positive and covers up setbacks. In this text, for 701, the king of the universe makes no explicit mention that he failed to conquer Jerusalem. In addition, part of a brief Assyrian text of a more religious nature has survived. It contributes modestly to our knowledge of the campaign. It states that Sennacherib conquered one Judahite town, Ezekah, which is north of both Lachish and Libnah, and also one city whose name has been lost, but which could be Gath, the Philistine stronghold south of Ekron that Hezekiah had annexed during his expansionist phase. The most vivid account of Sennacherib's atrocities is a wordless one. It's a bas relief of the siege of Lachish in 701. The king mounted this finely detailed sculpture on his palace wall at Nineveh. It depicts the tactics and awesome weaponry that he used to conquer Judah's second largest city, as well as the punishment that he inflicted on its inhabitants, including the execution of recalcitrants by means of torture. The tableau presents Sennacherib on a hilltop, receiving tribute from Hebrew captives. The resplendent king sits on his throne in front of the royal tent, while two attendants standing at either side of him wave fans made of plumes. The cuneiform inscription above the king's head states matter-of-factly, Sennacherib, the mighty king of the country of Assyria, sitting on the throne of judgment at the entrance of the city of Lachish. I give permission for its slaughter. In addition to providing vainglorious decor, the relief has a didactic function. In the most blunt and colorful terms, it made clear to envoys and other visitors from subject societies the risk inherent in rebellion. For any visitor to miss that point would have been difficult. The sculpture was more than 8.5 feet in height and measured 88 feet in length. Imagine 17 ping-pong tables placed on their ends vertically, one next to the other, a veritable stone IMAX. The relief now at the British Museum also has an ulterior political function by calling attention to spectacularly to Sennacherib's triumph at one Judahite city. The artworks serve to divert attention from his vexing failure to capture the same country's capital. Like the annal that describes the same campaign, it was part of the cover-up. Here is the main annal. The text is a modified version of the standard translation by Daniel David Luckenbill. In my third campaign, I marched against Hatti, Luli, the king of Sidon, whom the terror-inspiring glamour of my lordship had overwhelmed, fled far overseas, and perished. The awe-inspiring splendor of the weapon of Ashur, my lord, overwhelmed his strong cities such as Great Sidon, Little Sidon, Bit Ziti, Zari Butu, Malahiba, Ashur, Akzib, and Okol, all his fortress cities, walled and well provided with feed and water for his garrisons, and they bowed in submission to my feet. I installed Ethbaal, Tubal, upon the throne to be their king, and imposed upon him tribute due to me as his overlord to be paid annually without interruption. As to all the kings of Amuru, Menahem from Samsum Uruna, Tubal Lu from Sidon, Abdiliti from Arvad, Urumilki from Byblos, Mitininti from Ashdod, Buduilui from Beth Ammon, Kamusunabdi from Moab, and Iramu from Edom. They brought sumptuous gifts and forelode their heavy presents to me, and kissed my feet. Sidkiah, however, king of Ashkelon, who did not bow to my yoke, I deported and sent to Assyria, his family gods himself, his wife, his children, his brothers, all the male descendants of his family. I sent Sharuludari, son of Rukibtu, their former king, over the inhabitants of Ashkelon, and imposed upon him the payment of tribute and of presents due to me as overlord. And he now pulls the straps of my yoke. In the continuation of my campaign, I besieged Beth Dagon, Joppa, Banai, Barak, Azuru, cities belonging to Sidkai, who did not bow to my feet quickly enough. I conquered them and carried their spoils away. The officials, the patricians, and the common people of Ekron, who had thrown Padi, their king, into fetters because he was loyal to his solemn oath sworn by the god Ashur, and had handed him to Hezekiah, the Judahite, and he, Hezekiah, held him in prison unlawfully, as if Padi had been an enemy, had become afraid, as if Padi, be an enemy, had become afraid and had called for help upon the king of Egypt and the bowmen, the chariot corps, and the cavalry of the king of Cush, an army beyond counting. And they actually had come to their assistance. In the plain of El Teke, their battle lines were drawn up against me, and they sharpened their weapons. Upon a inspiring oracle given by Ashur, my lord, I fought with them and inflicted a defeat upon them. In the melee of battle, I personally captured alive the Egyptian charioteers with their princes, and also the charioteers of the king of Cush. I besieged El Teke and Timnah, and conquered them and carried their spoils away. I assaulted Ekron and killed the officials and patricians who had committed the crime, and hung their bodies on poles surrounding the city. The common citizen who were guilty of minor crimes I considered prisoners of war. The rest of them, who were not accused of crimes and misbehavior, I released. I made Padi their king come from Jerusalem and set him as their lord on the throne, imposing upon him the tribute due to me as overlord. As to Hezekiah the Judahite, he did not submit to my yoke. I laid siege to 46 of his strong cities, walled forts into the countless small villages in their vicinity, and conquered them by the means of well-stamped earth ramps and battering rams brought thus near to the walls, combined with the attack by foot soldiers, using mines, breaches, as well as sapper work. I drove out of them 200,150 people, young and old, male and female, horses, mules, donkeys, camels, big and small cattle beyond counting, and considered them booty. Himself I made prisoner in Jerusalem, his royal residence like a bird in a cage. I surrounded him with earthwork in order to molest those who were leaving the city gates. His town, which I had plundered, I took away from his country and gave them over to the Mitini, king of Ashdod. Padi, king of Ekron, and Silibel, king of Gaza. Thus I reduced his country, but I still increased the tribute and the presents due to me as their overlord, which I imposed later upon him beyond the former tribute, to be delivered annually. Hezekiah himself, whom the terror-inspired splendor of my lordship had overwhelmed, sent after me, after my departure to Nineveh, my royal city, his elite troops and their best soldiers, which he had brought into Jerusalem as reinforcements, with 30 talents of gold, 800 talents of silver, precious stones, antimony, large cuts of red stone, couches inlaid with ivory, chairs inlaid with ivory, elephant hides, ebony wood, boxwood, and all kinds of valuable treasures, his own daughters, concubines, male and female musicians, in order to deliver the tribute to do obeisance as slave. He sent his personal messenger. The Bible / Old Testament Old Testament's three accounts of the events of 701 BC are roughly similar. Of these, the two earliest are the second book of Kings, chapter 8, verses 13 through 19, and verse 37. And the book of Isaiah, chapters 36 and 37. The other version, compiled well after the others, is the second book of Chronicles, chapter 32. The second Kings and the Isaianic texts are almost but not quite identical. A resounding majority of scholars maintain that the Isaiah version was copied from the Second Kings text, rather than the other way around. The Second Kings narrative is also very slightly longer. This book will reflect the general view and use Second Kings as a preferred text. Conventional scholars say that Second Kings account was mostly written in the period of the 7th century BC. The 76th century BC. Oh, 7th or 6th. Yeah. Conventional scholars say that the Second Kings account was mostly written in the period of the 7th, 6th century BC. For our purposes, the book of Second Chronicles is of relatively little significance. Conventional scholars say it appears to have been written in the latter part of the 5th century BC, or perhaps early 4th century. Almost all scholars agree that whoever wrote Chronicles borrowed heavily from Second Kings / Isaiah prototype. It provides little new information that is reliable. Chronicles retells the siege story from a different perspective, while the Second Kings account emphasizes the role of the prophet Isaiah during the siege. For example, Chronicles plays up Hezekiah's performance and elaborates on his prior religious reforms. It also makes no mention to Taharka's advance. The main version in Second Kings is more than just an account of an important event. In context within the Bible, it is also significant. 4 of the Hebrew Bible's books, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, describe sequentially the rule of David's royal dynasty over its entire 4-century span. In this official history, 2nd Kings' account of the deliverance of Jerusalem occupies a literary function that, as noted, Ronald Clements describes as a kind of high point in the whole story of the monarchy, which begins in 1 Samuel 8 and does not conclude until 2 Kings 25. So why so lofty a function? Earlier, when describing Solomon's reign in 1 Kings, the biblical history had told of how Yahweh at the time chose Jerusalem as his city. My name shall be there, Yahweh had declared, referring to the temple. Yahweh's choice, Clements observes, now comes to its fullest justification in the story of the city's rescue out of the very grip of Sennacherib. The story represents a key element in what he calls the belief that this city, Jerusalem, was the subject of a special destiny in the election and historical fortunes of Israel. In the 3 books that recount the deliverance, Second Kings, Isaiah, and Second Chronicles, some passages are historically reliable, but others are not, providing false information that has thrown many experts off the trail. We will review the passages' credibility later. First and Second books of Kings were originally a single book of the Bible that had been divided. As the University of Chicago's Stephen W. Holloway has pointed out, the book is a theological history, not an attempt to offer an objective or dispassionate reportage of facts. Its authors were primarily concerned with the didactic possibilities of the reigns of their kings for illustrating the interplay of the divine and the human wills in light of the present. Still, the Book of Kings are far more reliable than the books of Chronicles. As Holloway points out, the chronicler took many more liberties with his sources. According to the exegeses of his theological program, he adds that the historical value of Chronicles is slender and should be used with greater caution for the purposes of historical reconstruction. In addition to these three narrative versions of the siege, the Bible also contains fleeting passages that refer to the event of 701. The most useful are scattered in early chapters of the book of Isaiah. Unlike chapters 36 and 37 of the same book, these passages do not repeat what is already in 2 Kings. Many experts agreed that either the prophet himself composed these oracles at the time of the event, or else that others wrote them after his death while they were under the impress of those events. The Hebrew Bible contains allusions to the crisis elsewhere, for example in Micah 1, 8-16, but these only shed a little additional light. Below is the pertinent text from 2 Kings. This rigorous translation, very slightly modified here, is by Mordecai Kogan and Haim Tadmor in the Anchor Bible series. Here are 2 points on style. True to the original Hebrew, the following translation renders Yahweh, YHWH instead of Yahweh, or, as in most English translations, Lord. This text is represented here in 3 different typefaces. This is to distinguish between different segments of the narrative that will be discussed later. Chapter 18 of 2 Kings. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all of Judah's fortified cities and seized them. Whereupon Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent a message to the king of Assyria at Lachish: I admit my guilt. Withdraw from me, and whatever you impose upon me I shall bear. The king of Assyria then imposed a payment of 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold upon Hezekiah, king of Judah. And so Hezekiah turned over all the silver stored in the house of Yahweh and in the palace treasury. At that time Hezekiah stripped the doors of the temple hall and the posts with which he himself had plated, and delivered them to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria dispatched the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. Together with a large force, they marched up to Jerusalem, took up position by the conduit of the upper pool of the Fuller's Field Road, on the Fuller's Field Road. 18. And they called for the king, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the royal steward, Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to them. The Rabshakeh spoke to them. Tell Hezekiah this said, the great king, the king of Assyria, what is this confidence of yours? Do you think that plans and arming for war can emerge from empty talk? Now, in whom have you put your trust that you rebelled against me? Here now, you put your trust in this splintered reed staff in Egypt, that if someone leans upon it, it pierces his palm and punctures it. That is Pharaoh, king of Egypt. to all who put their trust in him. And if you tell me it is in Yahweh or God that we put our trust, is he not the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, and then ordered throughout Judah and Jerusalem? You must worship before this altar in Jerusalem. Now, come, make a wager with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you will be able to supply riders for them, 24, and so. How could you turn down one of my master's minor servants and trust in Egypt for chariots and horsemen? 25 now was it 25 now was 25 now was it without Yahweh that I marched against this place to destroy it? Yahweh said to me, attack this country and destroy it. Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, Shebna, and Joah, had said to Rabshakeh, please speak Aramaic with your servant. We understand it. Do not speak Judean with us within earshot of the people on the wall. 27. But Rabshakeh answered them, what is it to your master and to you that my master has sent me to speak these words? Was it not rather to the men sitting on the wall, who, together with you, will have to eat their own excrement and drink their own urine? Then Rabshakeh stepped forward and called out loudly in Judean, hear the message of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he cannot save you from me. And do not let Hezekiah have you put your trust in Yahweh by saying, Yahweh will surely save us, and this city will not be handed over to the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus said the king of Assyria, send me a gift and surrender to me. Then each of you will eat his own vine and his own fig tree, and will drink water of his own cistern, until I come to transfer you to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive and honey, oil and honey. Stay alive and don't die. Do not listen to Hezekiah when he inclines you by saying, Yahweh will save us. Did any of the gods of these nations ever save his land from the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Where are the gods of Samaria? Did they save Samaria from me? Who are the gods of the countries? Who of all the gods of the countries was able to save his land from me, that Yahweh will be able to save Jerusalem from me? They remained silent and did not answer a word, for it was the king's order, do not answer him. Thereupon Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the royal steward, Shebna the scribe, Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their garments rent, and reported the Rabshakeh's message to him. Chapter 19. Biblical text. When Hezekiah heard this, he rent his garments and put on sackcloth and entered the house of Yahweh. He sent Eliakim the royal steward, Shebna the scribe, and the elder priest dressed in sackcloth to Isaiah, son of Amoz, the prophet. They told him, thus said Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, of rebuke, and of contempt. Children have come to the breach, but there is no strength for the birth. Perhaps Yahweh your God will listen to all the words of the Rabshakeh, whom his master the king of Assyria sent to taunt the living God, and will punish him for the words which Yahweh your God has heard. So do offer prayer for this last remnant. Now, when the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, speak thus to your master. Thus said Yahweh, do not be frightened by the words you have heard, by which these attendants of the king of Assyria reviled me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him, so that he will hear a report and return to his own country. I will strike him down by the sword in his own country. Now the Rabshakeh withdrew, and since he had heard that the camp had moved from Lachish, he found the king of Assyria engaged in battle at Libnah. He, the king of Assyria, received report from Tirhakah, the king of Cush. He has set out to do battle with you. So again he sent messengers to Hezekiah. Speak thus to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let your God deceive. Do not let your God deceive the one in whom you put your trust, by thinking Jerusalem will not be given over to the king of Assyria. Now, surely you have heard what the king of Assyria did to all the lands, destroying them. And will you be saved? Did the gods of the nations save them whom my ancestors destroyed, Gozan and Haran, and Reseph, and the Edenites of Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, and the king of Arpad, the king of Lair, Saravyaim, Hena, and Iwa? Hezekiah received the letter from the messenger and read it, and then went up to the house of Yahweh. Hezekiah spread out before Yahweh, and Hezekiah prayed before Yahweh, O Yahweh, God of Israel, enthroned upon the cherubim, you alone are the God of all the kingdom of the earth. It is you who made the heavens and the earth. Turn your ear, O Yahweh, and listen. Open your eyes, O Yahweh. Look, listen to the message that Sennacherib has sent to taunt the living God. Is it true, O Yahweh, that the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands, and put their gods to fire? For they are not gods, but only man's handicraft, mere wood and stone. Thus they were able to destroy them. But now, O Yahweh, our God, save us from his hand, so that all the kings of the earth may know that you, Yahweh alone, are God. Then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent a message to Hezekiah. Thus said Yahweh, God of Israel, I have heard your prayer to me, and concerning Sennacherib, king of Assyria, that is what Yahweh has spoken concerning him. This is what Yahweh has spoken concerning him. Maiden daughter Zion despises you, scorns you. Daughter Jerusalem shakes her head after you, whom you have taunted and reviled, against whom you have raised your voice and raised your eyes heavenward, against the Holy One of Israel. Through your messengers you taunt Yahweh by saying, with my many chariots I ascended mountain peaks, the far reaches of the Lebanon. I felled its tallest cedars, its choicest firs. I entered into its remotest lodge, its rich woodlands. It was I who dug and drank strange waters. And with the soles of my feet I tried up the Nile. Have you not heard? From of old I did it. In ancient days I fashioned it. Now I have brought it about, and it is fortified cities crashing into ruined heaps, their inhabitants powerless and dismayed and confounded. They were like grass in the field and fresh pastures, like straw on rooftops, blasted by the east wind. Your every action and your every pursuit I know, because you have raged against me, and your uproar rings in my ear. I'll put my hook in your nose, and my bridle between your lips, and turn you back in the very road by which you came. This shall be the sign for you. This year you shall eat from the aftergrowth, next year from the self-sown. But in the third year, sow and reap, plant vineyards and enjoy their fruit. The remaining survivors of the house of Judah shall add on roots below and produce fruit above. For a remnant shall emerge out of Jerusalem, and a survivor from Mount Zion. The zeal of Yahweh shall effect this. Therefore, thus says Yahweh concerning the king of Assyria, you shall not enter this city, nor shall he shoot an arrow there. He shall not move up defenses before it, nor throw up a siege mound against it. He shall go back by the same road he came, but into this city he shall not enter. The word of Yahweh. For I will defend this city and save it for my own sake, and for the sake of David my servant. That night Yahweh's angel went out and struck the Assyrian camp, 185,000 men, and at daybreak they were all dead bodies all about. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, broke camp and left. He returned to Nineveh, where he resided. Once as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch, his god. Adram Melech and Sharezer, his sons, struck him down with the sword, and then fled to the land of Ararat. Esarhaddon, his son, became king. The Greek author of the first important narrative history of the world, Herodotus, visited Egypt approximately 250 years after Sennacherib's invasion. His brief account of the hostilities of 701, just over 300 words in length, reflect a point of view that is not much Greek as Lower Egyptian, since it was Lower Egyptians who were Herodotus' sources. In the following text, translated by Aubrey de Selincourt, Hephaestus corresponds to the Memphite god. Ptah, Sethos, was Shibitku. Next on the throne after Anisis was Sethos, the highest priest of Hephaestus. He is said to have neglected the warrior class of the Egyptians and to have treated them with contempt, as if he had been unlikely to need their service. He offended them with various ways, not least by depriving them of the 12 acres of land which each of them had held by special privilege under previous kings. As a result, when Egypt was invaded by Sennacherib, the king of Arabia and Assyria, with a great army, not one of them was willing to fight. The situation was grave. Not knowing what else to do, the priest king entered the shrine and before the image of the god, complained bitterly of the peril which threatened him. In the midst of his lamentation, he fell asleep and dreamt that the god stood by him and urged him not to lose heart, for if he marched boldly out to meet the Arabian army, he would come to no harm, as the god himself would send him helpers. By this dream the king's confidence was restored, and with such men as were willing to follow him, not a single one of the warrior class, but a mixed company of shopkeepers, artisans, and market people, he marched to Pelusium, which guards the approaches of Egypt, and there took upon his position. As he lay here facing the Assyrians, thousands of field mice swarmed over them during the night and ate their quivers and their bowstrings and the leather handles of their shields, so that on the following day, having no arms to fight, they abandoned their position and suffered severe loss during their retreat. There is still a stone statue of Sethos in the temple of Hephaestus. The figure is represented with a mouse in its hand and the inscription, "Look upon me and learn reverence." Herodotus labored under a huge handicap. This traveler of the 5th century BC gleaned his information from the interviews with people who had only a spotty understanding of the facts. It is as though an amateur historian today were to reconstruct the U.S. Revolutionary War on the basis of Americans' folk memory, the dumping of a cargo of tea into the Boston Harbor by feisty dissidents, and the apocryphal story of young George Washington's admitting he chopped down his father's prized cherry tree might well loom larger than any discussion of the economics of colonialism or of General Washington's military strategy. Yet folk memory often contains grains of truth, just as the Boston Tea Party evokes oppressive taxation and the cherry tree yarn illustrates Washington's widely perceived integrity in the course of his presidency, so a factual base probably underlies Herodotus' version. The trick is to identify this base. The most spectacular of the account's inaccuracies, of course, is the peculiar assertion that it was mice that drove away the invaders. Later, we will examine that statement. Other oddities also leap out. One is the identification of Sennacherib as the king of Arabia and Assyria, and of leading the Arabian army. This would reflect the imperial force's high foreign content. Another error in the Greek writer's statement that the Assyrians march as far as Pelusium, which is inside of Egypt, not far from the Suez Canal, now joins the Mediterranean. In fact, Sennacherib never entered Egypt and probably did not get within 100 miles of Pelusium. What that geographical detail suggests is that the people of northern Egypt remembered Sennacherib's campaign as a real threat to their country's security. In addition, it is possible that, with blurred hindsight, in describing Sennacherib's invasion of 701, they may have borrowed elements from the other Assyrian aggressions of the tumultuous 716, 670, and 674 period. As seen in Chapter 6, Hayim Tadmor suggests that in 716 the Assyrian army under Sargon may have reached Pelusium. Another possible element in 674, the 25th dynasty defeated at an unknown location inside Egypt an army led by Sennacherib's son and successor, Esarhaddon. Of the three ancient accounts of the events of 701, Herodotus' tale is the most problematic, but we would do well not to follow the example of some historians and dismiss this account out of hand. Of the ancient sources, there is no question as to which yields the most clues to why Sennacherib turned tail. Biblical experts like Yale's Childs may minimize its informational value in regard to that question, but the Bible is truly useful. Like Edgar Allan Poe's purloined letter that lies in so obvious a place that the searchers do not find it, the Bible's evidence lies in full view.